Welcome to Separation Season Athletics. This is Fernando, and we're going to be going over the masterclass for understanding knee pain, why it happens, and how to correct it. So, who's this for? Athletes, weekend warriors, or really anybody dealing with knee pain? Who am I? I'm a health and performance coach, and I work with clients to reduce pain, rebuild strength, and keep them moving without fear of injury. Let's go over the 3 pillars of a healthy knee. First, the strong foundation is crucial. First, we have to have structural balance. Structural balance means that basically each muscle group from front to back or from top to bottom or even from one leg to the other needs to be in balance with each other and have some sort of symmetry. If there's an asymmetry or something's off with one of them, whichever one of the ratios, whether it's front to back or left to right discrepancies, then it can throw the whole thing off, and then one muscle or one joint might be doing way more work to pick up the slack for another. An example for this is your right knee might be in pain or whatever, or be very weak. Your hamstrings are very weak on the right side, so your left knee has to take over and do a lot more work. Therefore, it's doing more volume, which we're going to get into, but doing more work, and there's more demands on it, and that's when that knee pain occurs. Next is going to be mobility. One of the biggest things is also going to be strength and flexibility combined. A good example of this is going to be sometimes the quad can be very tight, and due to the quad being very tight, it can pull up on that kneecap and then expose the tendons to undue stress. But if we worked on our flexibility in the quad, then there would be no pull up on the kneecap and then therefore less stress on the tendon. And then volume. If we're looking at this graph right here, what's going to be very important is see low stimulus, moderate stimulus, optimal stimulus, and tipping point. There's going to be a diminishing returns on how much volume you're doing and what the return is going to be. At a certain point, you want to hit a certain amount of volume where it's optimal or moderate to optimal, but also it gets tricky because if you go overboard, then you go to the tipping point, and that's when the diminishing returns start to come on. And volume can be shown in the gym. It can also just be shown in daily life, whether that be you're walking more, whether that be you're starting to ride your bike to work, whether that be the volume is very low. Let's say you go from sitting for multiple weeks on end, and then you go and play basketball or something. The increase and spike of volume, the difference between sitting for multiple weeks and then is going to play basketball, is so drastic that your body and your tendons in your knee aren't able to handle that. That's why volume and tracking it and trying to be as cognizant to how much volume you're asking your knees to handle is going to be important to basically having a strong foundation and also getting out of injury or pain if you are. Let's go to what's out of balance. One of the major things that's out of balance for many people is going to be the quad muscles. Out of the quad muscles, there are going to be 4, but mainly we're going to talk about, for specific balance, the vastus medialis, which is going to be the teardrop muscle on the inner part of your thigh or the inner part of your quad, compared to the vastus lateralis, which is going to be the lateral portion of the quad. Many people, let's say just in a gym setting, they focus a lot on certain exercises and ranges of motion that cause the vastus lateralis to increase in size and strength, but without the proper care and taking into consideration the vastus medialis and exercises like doing more full range of motion and top and quarter exercises. And when people focus on mainly mid-range exercises for the quad, they develop the lateralis, the vastus lateralis more than the vastus medialis. And what happens is then the knee starts to track differently. That's when the knee starts going inward because the weakness of the vastus medialis is starting to become weaker, and this muscle is responsible for knee tracking. The stronger this is, the stronger it's going to be in line. The weaker it is, the knee's going to start wanting to come forward and inward more, therefore placing more stress on the joint. So some examples of just working on the vastus medialis or the VMO would be, first, if you're in pain, there's a difference between being in pain and getting out of pain, and then once you're out of pain, staying out of pain. Here's an example of an exercise that's working the VMO that's going to get you out of pain. This is called a backward sled drag. What it is walking backwards with some type of weight attached to you. It can be a sled, it can be chains, it can be a lot of different things, or it can just be nothing at all, just your body weight walking backwards. But by walking backwards, you're going to focus on that top range knee extension, which is going to target the vastus medialis. And we know what we talked about before then, that this muscle is responsible for knee tracking. So once we get stronger and better at this, getting out of pain is a lot easier, because also this motion is it's called concentric dominant, meaning that you're not asking the muscle to be under load or under gravity, right? There's no load that's pressing down onto the joint. It is actually only pushing away and moving something without any external force being put onto it. In comparison, once we get out of pain, progressing to something like a Poliquin step up, you can see the knee range of motion is very similar. But the only difference is that on the Poliquin step up, there's forces going down directly into the knee, and then you're also coming up as well. So we have what's called eccentric forces or lowering forces on the way down, and concentric forces or upward forces on the way up. Compared to this, where it's just concentric and there's no actual weight bearing on going on the way down, it's an easier place to start. But once you get better at this, just daily life, and then even if you want to get better at sports or in the gym in general, you're going to want to get stronger at also lowering under control in this position. That's where the Poliquin step up comes in. And then next, finally, also, we need to talk about the rectus femoris, which is a very important muscle because it crosses two joints. It crosses the hip and it also crosses the knee. So main functions are hip flexion, but also knee extension. So an exercise, the Gar hammer raise, is actually working on that rectus femoris, strengthening that better, because if this muscle is tight and weak, it can start to pull up on the kneecap and create undue stress onto what's called the patellar tendon, which is the tendon right under the kneecap. And many people have, let's say, jumper's knee or runner's knee right under the kneecap. So by strengthening the vastus medialis, but also the rectus femoris, which is directly correlated to there, is going to be a huge benefit. Next, let's go over the hamstring and the back parts. We went over the quad and the front. Now let's go over the back. What this is called knee flexion. What's going to be very important is that knee flexion is almost going to be the brakes for your knees. Anytime the hamstrings are engaged, they're acting as a decelerator for the knee. But what's going to be important is sometimes this range of motion going to a full bend, even though it's on a leg curl, might be too much. So that's why we would start with something calf raise, which this is the calf muscle right here called the gastroc, and it actually covers two joints as well. It covers the knee and the ankle. So it also works in knee flexion as well. So by starting here on the calf raise, you're working on the back side of the thigh and working on that part being stable, as well as how we talked about up here in the front of the thigh. But then, of course, you also want to do one side compared to the other. So just on any of these other exercises, we're working one side compared to the other to make sure they're both in balance. Where do you want to start if you're in pain right now is starting on a single leg calf raise, starting to get that gastroc stronger. From there, then you can start to progress to a leg curl, working on the hamstrings. And then you might be very weak on the leg curl at first. So what you want to do is still emphasize working one leg at a time. But what you're going to want to do is do what's called a 2 up, 1 down movement. Basically, you're going to go 2 legs up, and then you're going to lower with 1 leg on the way down. It's been shown that you're much more stronger lowering the weight than you are going up on the upward phase of increasing the weight. So what you could do is basically by doing the 2 up, 1 down, you are lowering and still training single leg knee flexion with a weight that you would not be able to do, or it'd be very hard to do single leg by itself. So it's almost like assisted on the way up and then you lower on the way down by itself. And over time, as you get better at that, then you can progress to just single leg by itself, going up and down just by itself with 1 leg. Now let's go over mobility. We talked about this a little bit, but the rectus femoris is going to be primarily, especially with jumper's knee, can be very tight. And when that's tight, it can pull up on that patellar tendon and also the kneecap and put more stress on there. So basically, when we stretch the rectus femoris in something like a couch stretch, it will help very much in this. And then also, let's go over the 90-90 stretch. What's going to be important with this is basically sometimes when your knee buckles in, it can be due to, like how we said above, a weak VMO, but then also can be due to a tight hip. So it can be one or the other. Sometimes it's both. That's why the Poliquin step up is so great, because it's strengthening the hip in a single leg range of motion while also strengthening the knee. But sometimes that hip is still tight. So by working on hip mobility, specifically with the 90-90 stretch, it can be very beneficial. And then finally, putting it all together, one of the ultimate movements for helping create a healthier knee through mobility, but also through strength, is going to be what's called a split squat. You can see how what we talked about before, the rectus femoris and the hip flexors are being lengthened, while also we're working on full range of motion in the knee, therefore creating more adaptation and strength in the VMO muscle that we talked about that helps track the knee. And we're also doing one leg at a time, which also is going to help any imbalance from left to right. This movement, after you get out of pain, then you're going to want to start going towards step ups and things to stay out of pain. And then this is the ultimate towards the bulletproofer, the more advanced progression. Because once you get to here, then the goal is to start working flat ground. And by then, once you get flat ground, this is about a 6-inch box. Once you get flat ground, you should have pretty solid knees, to be completely honest, if you're doing the form right and everything else is controlled. So this has been Fernando with Separation Season Athletics. If you're interested in personal coaching to help rehab any injury or prevent one from occurring, fill out the form below. Thank you for watching this masterclass.